Swarmers, welcome back to the Hive. So a few weeks ago, we spoke with William Klimpert, Common Ground Compost's resident data and waste management expert, about composting in New York City. And if you haven't seen it, I urge you to go watch it. It's awesome and super informative. But since then, there have been some pretty huge changes in the world. So today we're here with Meredith Danberg Ficcarelli, the director of Common Ground Compost, to talk about those changes and what the future of composting looks like in the Big Apple. Thank you so much for being here, Meredith. So excited to talk to you.
Hey, Lexi.
Let's just get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into sustainability?
Sure. Hi, Meredith Danberg Ficcarelli. I have a master's degree in urban policy analysis and sustainability management from the New School here in New York. And while I was getting that degree, I was lucky enough to take a spring semester course with a summer semester travel portion to Beirut in Lebanon. And while I was there, I volunteered for an organization that wanted to sort of go down this zero waste path. They are the oldest farmers market in the city, and also we're running a farm to table restaurant, which is still open there. And they wanted the restaurant to be zero waste. And I was already interested in sustainability, but was really focused more, my brain was focused more generally on infrastructure and kind of the overlapping ways in which our current infrastructural systems are inefficient. Thinking about like waste heat in wastewater and why gyms use electricity instead of having the people on the machines powering the buildings that they're in, right? But like, I'm not a mechanical engineer. I did some research on waste and doing a waste audit and met some really incredible people. This was over the summer of 2011 and fell into garbage, and I've been doing it ever since. I love this work. I think it's very inspiring. I think that organics, food scraps are sort of this, especially at the time, but even still now, this kind of low-hanging fruit portion of the waste stream that until someone thinks about food scraps, they're unseen. And then once someone does start to separate their food scraps, start composting, start diverting that material from landfill, suddenly it's like the most obvious thing in the trash. As soon as you see an onion peel in the trash can, it's like, remove it immediately, right? So, you know, it's been really inspiring to do this work. After returning from, so I lived in Beirut for a little while, co-founded and ran an organization with my now husband, Naji Bustani, focusing on waste diversion, composting, recycling, education, advocacy. It was not the greatest time to be doing that work just because there's a war and a refugee crisis and all kinds of things going on. There's still incredible work going on in Lebanon. I moved back to New York and worked for a little while for the Lower East Side Ecology Center, doing marketing and program development for them. And through that process, I met Laura Rosenshine, who founded Common Ground Compost and Reclaimed Organics. I started here in 2015 and have been doing this work ever since, which is consulting, working with events, working with micro hauling and micro scale collection, and then doing advocacy around organics, recycling, and waste diversion, zero waste in the city.
Wow, amazing. That's incredible. So let's get into this sort of hard-hitting issue right now. We know that the city has cut funding to the brown bin program due to big budget cuts brought about by the coronavirus pandemic that we are undergoing right now. Can you talk to us a little bit about those changes brought on by the pandemic these last few weeks, and what is the current state of composting because of it?
Yeah, yes, certainly unfortunate. The pandemic is unfortunate. The loss of life and challenges that we're facing are very unfortunate. The city is under, the city, the state, the country, and the globe obviously are all under significant budget constraints because the economy is shut down. And the mayor sort of applied sweeping cuts to the entire city budget. So it's not just the Department of Sanitation's budget that was cut, but about $28 million were pulled just from organics recycling. There are other things that were also impacted, but just to focus on the organics piece, 21 million were pulled from what we refer to as the brown bin program, which are pickups of bins that are brown from people's homes, hence the brown bin program. Additionally, though, about $7 million was cut from drop-off programs, local processing, and education, all of which are obviously really important. The drop-offs are different from the brown bin program for a few reasons. Physically, instead of a bin being emptied, that a homeowner brings out to the curb and has collected by a truck, the drop-offs, it's an individual responsibility. I bring my food scraps to a community drop-off, and then there's an organization that picks that material up and brings it to a local processing site. The destination of that material is also different. The brown bins are destined for industrial scale processing, while the drop-offs are run by local nonprofit organizations that do local composting. So that's another really important distinction, both from the perspective of what could be put in the bins. Because the brown bins were industrial composting, they could take meat and bones and dairy, while the drop-offs are fruits and veggies only for the most part. So those are some major differences. All of it's gone. Everything that I just said has been defunded. Silver lining, the initiatives that are underway right now through what's being called the Save Our Compost Coalition, hashtag Save Our Compost, are to restore funding, $7 million plus for those drop-offs and for those nonprofits that were running the hyper-local compost sites that I mentioned. So the goal is, even though this would not restore collection to every single household that used to have it with the brown bin program, it would be ideally not only restoring, but ideally expanding the distribution of the drop-off opportunities that existed, so that more New Yorkers in more regions, there was not equitable distribution of those drop-offs before, so seeking more equitable opportunities, and then also restoring funding so that the jobs that used to be there and have since been cut or furloughed can be restored as well, so that we can have, continue sort of to grow the local organics economy. What we've just discussed is the residential compost sector. New York City also has a commercial waste sector. So all of our businesses are shut down for the most part. There are definitely still businesses that are operating. There are still commercial waste haulers that are picking up compost, but at a very small volume of what it used to be. And our bicycle-powered pickup program, Reclaimed Organics, is now fitting kind of in between, where before we used to focus on the commercial work, picking up from small cafes and small restaurants and also a lot of offices. We've pivoted to focusing on residents who are able to pay a fee for collection service. Not everyone is, not everyone wants to. And we continue to advocate for free composting for residents, but we are here offering this service for those who wish to opt in.
Right, because composting should not be a privilege, right?
Absolutely. We think that people should be able to opt into the convenience of having a collection service if they want it, but completely agreed. It should, at its very core, it should be free.
Yeah. So Reclaimed Organics is sort of our currently our one hope right now. It's the thing that's you guys have going, and it's a limited area, if I'm not mistaken, that some people are able to compost. Otherwise, there's really nothing going on in New York.
So we're one of a few micro haulers that are operating. So we're not the only hope. We are one of a few hopes, if you will. We operate in Manhattan. It was initially anywhere south of 86th Street. That barrier has started to increase a little bit northward, but we're not collecting north of 100th Street for now. There are BK Rot is a bicycle powered pickup service, nonprofit youth advocacy organization that's focused in central Brooklyn. And there are actually a number of other micro haulers that are popping up. Basically people who, when their opportunity to compost for free was taken from them, they took it upon themselves to figure it out, which is so exciting. And we call this scale of collection micro hauling. We, BK Rot and Reclaimed Organics, are bicycle powered, zero emissions haulers. And that's really where we want to see this micro hauling industry move, is in a direction that is not contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's exciting to see others doing this work. These are all fee for service operations. There's obviously a lot of labor involved in doing this work, whether it's just coordinating logistics and doing the pickups or actually making the compost. And I think it's another silver lining here is that these fee for service operations that are popping up are helping provide some transparency into the work that goes into collecting and processing waste, and hopefully helps individuals recognize the impact that they have, but also the benefit that they can offer by choosing the destination of their material.
Yeah, just by the inspiring work you guys are doing, you sort of are being able to educate, which is something that was cut along with all of these amazing services. So it's a really wonderful way to sort of sneak that in there and spread this amazing message. So folks that are at home in New York who want to continue composting, they have these options. They can reach out to micro haulers. Is there anything else that you'd recommend?
Yeah, New Yorkers can compost at home. You can do this yourself. Composting, it's a biological process. It's something that each of us can undertake on our own if we want to. Different types of composting do require different resources, whether they are physical or financial. So that's something to recognize. Roughly, we think there are 3 ways that we would suggest composting at home, but there are many more than what I'm going to suggest. So it's important for people that are interested in this to do some research, and you can probably find other ways that you can do this yourself, or tweaking the recommendations. So roughly, you can have a compost bin. You can do vermicomposting, which is composting with worms. Although it's not compost, using worms, or doing a fermentation organics recycling process, which is called bokashi composting, which is what we do in our garden. And then we actually take the fermented food scraps and put them into a compost bin. So again, there are lots of ways that this can work. Each of these require different things. So the compost bin, requires a bin. So it can be something that you build, it can be something that you buy, but it does need to be somewhere. So it needs physical space, and usually that should be outdoors. And it does require a carbon source. So it's not just your food scraps, which are nitrogen. It needs carbon, which is dried leaves, twigs, sticks, mulch, brown, crunchy, dry stuff. Shredded pizza boxes can be a carbon source. Shredded newspaper. Newspaper is printed with soy-based inks, so it's safe to compost. So those are some of the important things to consider with the compost bin. With vermicomposting, you need the worms. So that's an important thing to recognize. Worms can be purchased from local organizations or online. Other than that, you need some bedding, which is usually shredded newspaper, and then you need food scraps. In both the compost bin and the vermicomposting environments, you're going to want to only put fruits and vegetables. So you're not going to want to put any meat or dairy in those. And worms can be a little particular. They really don't like citrus, for example. So you're going to need to do a little bit of research there. Also, worms want to eat small things. So you need to chop up your food scraps before feeding them. Anyway, and then a third option, bokashi composting is a fermentation process. You can actually buy an entire bokashi composting kit on the internet and just follow the instructions, which include taking your food scraps, meat and dairy included, putting them into a bucket, and then basically like feeding fish with this sprinkly stuff that they give you. That is called bokashi, and it is an inoculated material. What you might buy on the internet is probably going to be wheat bran. Our program uses coffee chaff, which is a waste product from the coffee roasting process. And it's inoculated with bacteria that we commonly find on our bodies: lactic acid, yeast, and it's not phototropic, I always say it wrong, photosynthetic bacteria, right? Just 3 bacteria that are commonly found in the soil and in our bodies. Those help to ferment the food scraps. But once the bin is full, you set it aside, sealed, for 2 weeks so that it can ferment. And then it needs to be buried underground. So you're gonna need access to a yard or something for the bokashi system as well.
And the first 2, just for our viewers who are interested in trying this at home, so they compost, we have a bin, and it gets full, and then what?
Yeah, with the compost bin especially, it's going to take a long time for the bin to actually be full because food is mostly water. And so it's going to lose volume and moisture over time. My dad has a backyard bin that he filled probably for more than 3 years before it was too full and he needed to remove compost from the bottom. It's kind of a nice, like, put it in and forget about it situation. But yes, the compost itself, what you end up with is this recycled organic matter, and it has nutrients and biodiversity and fungi, depending on the source of the compost, that your plants really want. So you add it to soils, you add it to your potted plants, you can add it to your street trees. Every plant is a little bit different, so you want to know what the plant wants before, succulents aren't going to want a ton of compost, for example. But yes, you would use it. Same with the worm castings. There's a different process for harvesting that stuff from your worm bin, but yeah, you would use it in your soils to improve the health and the biodiversity of those soils.
Awesome. There's so many options. This is so great. So everyone, do your research. It's awesome stuff going on. So with all of these budget cuts going on, what do you see as the ultimate ramifications? I mean, who knows when we'll be fully open, when things will be back to normal, whatever that means, whenever that is. But do you think it'll be difficult to bring the brown bin system back?
Or should we bring the brown bin system? If I had a magic wand, our city's waste infrastructure would look a little different. What I really believe, and what a lot of waste advocates believe, is that first of all, we as consumers need to be more aware of what we're purchasing, of the impact of our packaging. Whether it's the city or the state or the nation or the globe needs to be lobbying companies to be more responsible for the products that they're producing, right? So that's a different conversation. On the composting front, one thing that I would really like to see is more community scale composting, reuse of resources. So not just food scraps, but also clothing swaps and repair workshops. My fan is broken. Who can help me fix it? Who lives within 5 blocks? Probably a bunch of people, but we don't know each other, right? So one of the things that has been proposed by City Council is the CORE Act, the Community Organics Recycling Empowerment Act, that has the goal of having 3 drop-off locations in each community board district that would be for organics and potentially other materials. This was just announced a few weeks ago, so it's still very new. There aren't that many details on it just yet. But one of the goals obviously is distributed access. But there are lots of questions. Where's the material going to go? Who's going to process it? Are these going to be staffed? Is someone going to be paid to do this work? And what I would really like to see is, I say but I think there are other people that agree with me, is that at least one of these sites is a permanent composting site. We need more of this infrastructure, not only so that people can have access to it, but also so people can see it happening. And they can understand why it matters for them to separate their banana peels and chicken bones or whatever it might be. Although community composting might not want chicken bones, but you get the idea. If they can see people working, whether they're being trained or ideally have part or full-time employment opportunities within the community to work with materials, we might see other people beginning to value those materials more.
Yes, that's a huge thing we talked about with our interview with William a few weeks ago. Just how composting, like so many things in the sustainable world, can appear to be intimidating or overwhelming or confusing when really it's not so much. And I think you're right that if it was just a little more out there, taken a little more, not seriously, but just more accessible to people in a more wide way, I think people will be less intimidated by it for sure.
In a more transparent way too,
Yeah.
and I do want to be clear, a drop-off system won't work for everyone. It won't work for every community. We have some communities that are very dense. We have others that are not. And so I do think that some type of collection program will need to be reinstated. One of the other things that the Save Our Compost campaign is advocating is for mandatory organics recycling for residents. There is a lot to unpack there about what that looks like and how it would be implemented. But I do think education is going to play a huge role, and also really, really thoughtful and efficient collection methods, whether that's like consolidation at the end of a block instead of a pickup at every single household, so that the city can save money. The important piece here is that one of the reasons the brown bin program was sort of easy to shut down is that it was inefficient and expensive. And that's partly because people weren't well educated on why to participate. The trucks weren't full, right? And if they were, then the trash trucks would have been able to come less frequently, because the food waste is the smelly stuff. The food scraps are putrescible.
Right.
And so we're talking about a rethink of the entire system, not just one service.
So potentially this could be silver lining, an opportunity for rethinking, which would be great. Awesome, Meredith. So we've talked about so many amazing things. And we're going to link to a lot of the great stuff you've talked about here, but is there anything in particular you'd like to mention for people to help hashtag save the compost?
Save our compost.
Save our compost.
So what I would ask is that people stay tuned. The ways that they can stay tuned include joining the Common Ground Compost newsletter, which we will link to, and checking out reclaimedorganics.org/saveourcompost. Where there's a list of, it explains what's going on. It offers opportunities for people to reach out to their council members, which is still an option, always. You can always reach out to your city council person, and also how to find that person. So that's what we would suggest on the Save Our Compost side of things. And I'd be happy to also just ask that people, while you're at home, pay attention to your trash. I'm sure you already are, because suddenly you aren't going to an office every day and using office trash cans. Everything that you touch is going into your own waste. Think about where those things are coming from, and think about whether there are opportunities for you to shift your own purchasing behavior to avoid even needing to discard those items in the first place. Especially hard to recycle packaging. The like floppy plastic envelopes that maybe you get almonds or something in are not recyclable through regular recycling programs. One step up that I have adopted since the pandemic started, I'm paying for a service now through a company called TerraCycle, where I'm going to be diverting all of my hard to recycle food packaging by paying for a box and shipping it off to them to turn into other products. Not everyone can do that, but you can sort of pay attention to where your dollars are going and support companies that have a mission.
Yeah, it's so true nowadays being home. It is crazy to see the changes. Also with people cooking more at home, there are lots more food scraps. It's really true. You kind of just said it, but I do want to just close out if you have another favorite tip or idea in regards to composting or just sustainability in general for our viewers.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry for jumping the gun there.
It's awesome. It's right.
Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, the zero waste lifestyle is marketed as something that's really beautiful and glamorous and minimalist. It can be something that you spend a ton of money doing, but it can also be something that's free. my personal opinion is that the best way to be zero waste is to not buy new things, right? So think about it that way. It can be really intimidating to look up a guideline, a set of guidelines on how to be zero waste and read 7,000 things that you should be doing. Just start with one. So that's one recommendation. And the other one, something that I have started doing again since being more stuck at home. I always work from home, so anyway, I try to purchase eggs in cartons instead of plastic, again, sort of to support a materials economy that's focused more on natural products rather than petroleum-based products. But I have also started shredding my egg cartons into tiny pieces and putting those in my compost bin instead of putting the egg carton in the recycling bin, the paper recycling bin, which seems so simple, but it speaks to the idea of the materials value hierarchy, where the closer we can keep the material to where it was generated, the better, because we are potentially valuing the material more, and we are reducing the transport impact. It can go both ways though, and I'll end after this. For example, with wine corks, natural wine corks can certainly be composted because they are made of wood, but cork is an incredible material with tons of valuable reuse and upcycling opportunities. So if you like drinking wine and if your wine has a natural cork instead of a synthetic plastic cork, consider a program like ReCork, or dropping off those corks at a Whole Foods or another place that accepts them for recycling, because by keeping that stream separate and allowing it to be diverted and recycled as cork, you sort of respect the value of the cork rather than just considering it as an organic material.
I love that. That makes me think of another great tip we've heard actually here in an interview some time ago, thinking about reduce, reuse, recycle as a priority list in that order, which is kind of exactly what you just said, right? First of all, reduce, get less stuff, then reuse, like this cork idea, and then recycle, close the circle if you can. And I think that's a really awesome way of thinking about it. It's changed my life since I sort of reframed that idea.
Yeah, there are lots of R's. You could add refuse at the top, which arguably fits into reduce, but yes, couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
That's so great. Thank you so much for joining us, Meredith. This was really awesome and informative, and although this is a hard hit in the composting community, you've given me and all of us a lot of hope and a lot of things to go research and do some work on, which is super awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure, and happy to connect with anyone who wants more information or wants us to help them compost and recycle. We're here.
Yes, hit up Common Ground Compost and Reclaimed Organics. And swarmers, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll put a bunch of links on this YouTube channel so you guys can check those out, and hashtag save our compost. So check it out.
Thank you.